He had it all: the job, the car, the plan, until one moment, one mistake, turned it all into dust. They said he'd never come back from it, that he was finished. But they were wrong, because what broke him would one day build him into something unstoppable. And maybe that's the same truth waiting for you. But let's rewind to the moment it all fell apart. He walked out of that office with his box of belongings, his heart pounding, his head empty. A few hours earlier, he was standing tall, smiling, confident. Now he was fired. The world that once cheered his name suddenly forgot it. Friends disappeared. Messages stopped. He stared at his phone, refreshing his inbox. Nothing. The city lights that once inspired him now looked cold. Every success story he'd ever read replayed in his mind, and all he could think was, what if that was never meant for me? Have you ever felt that way? Like life just took everything you worked for and tore to pieces? But here's the twist most people never see. The moment when you think your story's over, that's actually when it begins. He didn't know it yet, but his setback was secretly a setup for something bigger. Because pain isn't punishment, it's preparation. Weeks passed. He sent out resumes, dozens of them, silence. He tried to stay positive, but every no cut deeper than the last. Bills piled up, hope thinned out, and one night, sitting alone in a small, dim apartment, he whispered, maybe they were right. Maybe I'm not enough. But then something inside him flickered. A memory, a line from his late father. Son, fire doesn't destroy gold. It refines it. Those words hit different that night, because he realized life had thrown him into fire, but maybe not to end him, maybe to purify him. He stopped chasing what he lost and started building what he could become. Every rejection, every failure, every closed door became fuel. He began to ask himself a new question. Not why me, but what can this teach me? And that question changed everything. He woke up one morning and decided, no more waiting for luck. No more hoping someone would save him. If no one believed in him, he'd believe in himself twice as hard. He started small, reading, learning, working, building something from nothing. He turned his pain into progress. He started a business in his kitchen, using an old laptop and a dream everyone else laughed at. They said it would fail, but he'd already failed before. So what did he have to lose? He worked through nights so long he forgot what sleep felt like. And every time he wanted to quit, he remembered the fire. Because when life burns you, you have two choices. Let it consume you, or use it to light your way. Here's what no one tells you. Every setback you face has two sides. One side is pain, the heartbreak, the loss, the fear. The other side is power, the lesson, the strength, the rebirth. Most people stop at the pain. They let it define them. They believe failure means they're finished. But you're not finished. You're forging. Every mistake is metal being shaped by fire. Every disappointment is a hammer strike, loud, hard, painful, but necessary. Because the strongest people you know, they didn't get there by avoiding pain. They got there by transforming it. Months passed. His small idea started gaining traction. One client turned into 5. 5 turned into 50. And suddenly, the same people who once doubted him were calling his name again. They wanted to work with him, to learn from him, to understand how he did it. But here's the truth he never said out loud. He didn't win because he was lucky. He won because he refused to let pain have the last word. He realized every no was fuel. Every loss was data. Every heartbreak was training. He turned his setbacks into rocket fuel, and that's what launched him higher than ever before. But success wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new challenge, because the higher he climbed, the harder the test became. And what came next would test not his skill, but his soul. One morning, as he stood looking over his growing company, a single phone call changed everything again. His supplier had collapsed. His account was frozen. And overnight, he was on the edge of losing everything again. The fire had come back. But this time, he wasn't the same man. This time, he knew how to use it. It happened fast. Too fast. One day, everything was growing. Clients calling, Sales climbing, smiles everywhere. The next day, chaos. The supplier he trusted vanished overnight. Payment stopped. His business froze. And just like that, he was right back where he started, staring at the edge of disaster. He sat in his office, hands trembling, feeling the weight of déjà vu. Was he really going to lose it all again? The same walls that once echoed with laughter now whispered fear. And deep down, a quiet voice asked, "Was everything you built just an illusion?" That night, he drove home in silence. The city lights blurred through the windshield, like streaks of memory he couldn't hold on to. He thought about all those nights he'd worked while others slept, all those sacrifices, all those moments of hope. And for what? His phone buzzed with messages. Clients panicking, partners blaming, numbers dropping. The old pain returned, heavy and familiar. And for a moment, he almost gave in. He almost quit. Because sometimes, it's not the failure that breaks you. It's the repetition of it. When you fall again, after you thought you finally made it. He walked into a small apartment, sat in the dark and whispered, "Maybe this is where it ends." But then, a strange calm washed over him. He remembered something that had once saved him before. Fire doesn't destroy gold, it refines it. His father's voice again, echoing from memory. He realized this wasn't punishment. It was promotion, another chance to rise, another chance to turn pain into purpose. The next morning, he woke up early. No more self-pity, no more waiting for luck. He stared in the mirror, eyes tired but fierce. "Not this time," he said quietly. He called every client, every partner. He faced every failure head-on, refusing to hide. He took responsibility for the chaos, even when it wasn't all his fault. And something shifted. People saw his courage, his composure, his grit, and they began to trust him even more. They realized he wasn't the kind of man who ran when things got hard. He was the kind who rebuilt. Days turned into weeks. He found new suppliers. He negotiated better deals. He learned, adapted, evolved, and slowly the cracks began to close. The business started breathing again. But this time, success felt different. It wasn't just about money or proving people wrong. It was about understanding this truth. Setbacks don't come to stop you. They come to shape you. Every storm in life has two purposes: to test what's weak and to strengthen what's strong. He realized the first time he fell, he built strength. The second time he fell, he built wisdom. And those two together, strength and wisdom, became unstoppable fuel. He began to see setbacks differently, not as endings, but as energy, not as curses, but as commands to grow. He started sharing his story online. At first, only a few listened, but soon thousands tuned in because they saw themselves in him. They too had fallen. They too were trying to rise, and his words gave them fire again. He learned 3 unshakable truths. 1. Pain reveals who you really are. When things fall apart, the mask drops. You see your real strength, not the one you show others, but the one that keeps you breathing when everything else burns. 2. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's the path to it. Every setback carves wisdom into your soul. It teaches you what no victory ever could. 3. Growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in chaos. The places that scare you most are where your power is forged. He stopped running from failure. Instead, he started chasing it because he knew if something scared him, it meant it was worth doing. And each time he faced fear, he discovered something new inside himself. A new level of courage, a new layer of resilience, a new kind of strength. Months later, his business was stronger than ever, more efficient, more focused. But beyond that, he was stronger. He wasn't just surviving setbacks anymore. He was thriving because of them. And one day, he got invited to speak at an event, a hall full of young entrepreneurs, faces full of hope, fear, and hunger. He stood on that stage, lights blazing, crowd silent. And for a moment, he felt that old nervousness return. But then he looked out and smiled, because he realized he was looking at his past self in all those faces. He told them his truth. I thought setbacks were my enemy, but they were my greatest teachers. They didn't take from me. They gave me everything I needed. The crowd erupted, but even as they clapped, he felt something deeper stirring inside him, something unfinished. Because while he had rebuilt his business, he still hadn't faced the one person who caused his biggest fall in the first place. The man who betrayed him, the one who cost him his first job. And that meeting was coming sooner than he thought. He received an email one morning, an invitation to a major business conference. He scrolled through the speaker list and froze. There it was, that name, the man who had once humiliated him, the man who had smiled as he watched him fall. Now, fate was calling them to the same stage, the same spotlight, the same battlefield. He closed the email, his heart pounding. The question wasn't if he'd show up, it was how. Would he seek revenge or redemption? The fire inside him flickered again, hotter than ever. This time, it wasn't just about rising. It was about facing the past and conquering it. He couldn't stop staring at the email. The subject line glared back at him like a ghost from the past. Keynote speaker confirmation, Global Business Summit. And below it, the list of featured names. His eyes locked onto one. That one, the man who'd once ruined everything. The man who'd smiled while signing the papers that ended his career. The man who had made him question his own worth. Now, fate was bringing them to the same stage, same audience, same spotlight. His hands trembled slightly as he closed his laptop. He whispered to himself, "You asked for growth, this is it." He knew this was an accident. It was a test. A fire come back to see if he'd really learned how to rise. The night before the conference, sleep refused to come. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind a storm of old memories. He saw himself, years ago, standing in that cold office, holding a cardboard box filled with his things. He could still feel the sting of betrayal, the smirk on that man's face, the sound of the door closing behind him. Part of him wanted revenge. To stand on that stage and prove he'd become greater than the man who once crushed him. To let the world see who the real winner was. But another part whispered something different. Something quieter and stronger. This isn't about him anymore. It was about who he had become. Because sometimes your biggest victory isn't destroying your enemy. It's not needing to. Still, the fire burned. And as he drifted into restless sleep, he didn't know which version of himself would wake up in the morning, the man who wanted peace or the one who wanted justice. Morning came. He put on his suit, simple, sharp, symbolic, not to impress, but to remind himself how far he'd come. The conference hall was massive, lights bright, cameras flashing, the low hum of chatter filling the air. He took a deep breath and walked in, and there he was, across the room. The man who'd once in his career stood surrounded by people, confident, laughing, shaking hands like nothing had ever happened. Their eyes met, just for a second. The past collided with the present, a silent earthquake between two men who shared the same story, but lived it from opposite sides. He felt that old pain rise again, but he also felt something else, power, not the kind that comes from control, but from forgiveness. Because when you forgive someone, you don't set them free, you set yourself free. He walked to the stage as his name was called. The spotlight hit him. The room fell silent. This was it, the moment that would define him. Not by what he'd lost, but by what he'd become. He looked out at the sea of faces, young dreamers, hungry minds, restless hearts. And then he saw him again, sitting in the crowd, listening. He smiled slightly and began. "A few years ago, I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my confidence, and I blamed everyone but myself. But what I didn't realize was that the fire wasn't sent to destroy me. It was sent to build me." The crowd leaned in. Every word carried the weight of truth forged in pain. You see, we think setbacks mean we're broken, but they're actually proof we're being built. The hammer only hits what it's shaping. The fire only touches what's becoming gold. His voice shook slightly, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was emotion. Real, raw, human. There was someone once who made me believe I wasn't good enough. But looking back, He didn't end me. He ignited me. Without that fall, I would have never found the strength to rise. A hush swept across the room. The man in the crowd looked down, expression unreadable. And for the first time, he didn't feel anger. He felt gratitude. Because without that betrayal, he wouldn't be standing here, stronger, wiser, free. After the speech, the applause filled the hall like thunder. But he wasn't chasing claps anymore. He was chasing clarity. He finally understood what true power was. Power isn't control. It's peace. It's the calm inside the chaos. It's the strength to smile when life tests you again, knowing you can handle it. Because the truth is, life will never stop throwing fires at you. But the question is, will you burn or will you blaze? He chose to blaze. And as he stepped off the stage, he felt lighter than he had in years. No bitterness, no revenge, just peace. After the event, as the crowd dispersed, someone tapped his shoulder. He turned around. It was him, the man from his past. Older now, less confident than he remembered. "Hey," the man said quietly, "I watched your speech." A pause, a silence thick with years of unspoken words. "I was wrong," the man said finally. "About you, about everything." For a moment, time froze. He could have said 1,000 things. He could have reminded him of the pain, the loss, the nights of struggle. But instead, he just smiled. "Don't worry about it," he said. "Because without that, I wouldn't be who I am today." The man looked stunned. "After everything I did, you're not angry?" He shook his head. "No, I'm grateful." And in that instant, the past dissolved. Not because it disappeared, but because it no longer controlled him. He had faced a fire and walked out glowing. Later that night, he sat alone in his hotel room, looking out at the city lights, the same city where he'd once failed. But tonight, it looked different. He realized the secret he'd been chasing all along. Success isn't about never falling. It's about rising different every time you do. He whispered to himself, "This is what it means to turn pain into power." He had conquered the fire outside. Now he was ready to face the one inside, the one that whispered there was still something left undone. Because while the world saw a man who had risen, he still hadn't faced his greatest fear. And what came next would push him beyond everything he thought he could handle. He thought the fire was over. He thought the storms had passed. But life has a way of testing those who rise. Because just when you think you've made it, life will whisper, "Let's see what you've learned." It came without warning. A sudden downer in the market, clients pulling out, investors panicking. Once again, everything he built stood on the edge of collapse. He sat in his office, quiet, calm, watching the numbers fall on the screen. And then he smiled, not out of arrogance, but because, for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid. He whispered to himself, "I've been here before, but I'm not the same man anymore." He gathered his team, the same people who once looked to him for strength. Their faces were full of worry, fear, uncertainty. "What do we do?" one asked. He looked around the room, eyes steady. "We rise," he said. "No anger, no panic, just quiet certainty." Because he finally understood that success isn't built in good times. It's built in hard ones. The room went silent as he spoke. "I know this looks bad, but every time we've been here before, something greater came out of it. Every fall gave us wings. Every failure gave us fire. So no, we don't run. We rebuild." Something in his tone shifted the atmosphere. You could feel it. The fear in the room began to fade, replaced by focus. Because leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about being the calm in the storm. And that day, he became that calm. Weeks passed. They worked day and night, adjusting, innovating, staying relentless. He didn't sleep much, but he smiled more than ever. Because even though things were tough, he wasn't running from it anymore. He was running with it. He realized something powerful. The same fire that once scared him now fueled him. The same pain that once broke him now drove him. Every setback had become a spark. Every loss a lesson. Every wound a weapon. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tides began to turn. One small deal came through. Then another. Then another. Momentum returned like a wave. Stronger, faster, brighter. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was mastering the storm. Late one night, after another long day of rebuilding, he stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Rain fell softly, tapping against the rail. He thought about everything that had brought him here. The failures, the betrayal, the losses, the long nights filled with doubt. And then he smiled through the rain, because now he understood. Setbacks don't come to end you. They come to educate you. Every disappointment was a class. Every heartbreak was a teacher. Every mistake was a map. And if you learn from them, you'll never lose again. Because life doesn't break strong people. It builds them. He finally understood the secret that had been hidden in every battle, every burn, every loss. You are not shaped by what happens to you. You are shaped by how you respond to it. When you see pain as a problem, you shrink. When you see pain as a teacher, you grow. He used to run from the fire. Now he walked through it, knowing it couldn't touch what he'd become inside. He had learned that setbacks are not signals to stop. They're signs that you're evolving. Because growth hurts. Transformation burns. But what comes after is gold. He whispered softly, almost to himself. Every fire that tried to consume me only ended up fueling me. Months later, the business wasn't just back. It was thriving beyond imagination. Global reach, loyal clients, a stronger team than ever before. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was internal. He no longer measured success by numbers or applause. He measured it by peace, by how calm he stayed when things fell apart, by how quickly he could find a lesson in the loss, by how deeply he trusted himself when everything else looked uncertain. That was the unbreakable flame, the one no storm could ever extinguish. He walked to the mirror one morning and barely recognized the man staring back, not because he looked different, but because he felt different. The boy who once begged life to go easy on him had become the man who whispered, "Give me your best shot." Because once you learn how to turn pain into power, you stop fearing life. You start fueling it. He looked out the window, sunlight spilling through the glass, and smiled. "The fire didn't destroy me," he said quietly. "It revealed me. Now it's your turn. You might be standing in the middle of your own fire right now. Your job gone. Your dream delayed. Your hope fading. But listen closely. This isn't where your story ends. This is where your power begins. Don't waste your pain. Don't run from your failures. Use them. Fuel them. Let them make you unstoppable. Because the truth is simple. You can't control the fire, but you can decide what it makes of you. So rise, rebuild, refuse to quit. Turn every setback into rocket fuel and let the world see not what broke you, but what built you.